The ranchers hung on every word as Eva Washington rolled her wheelchair closer to the breeding charts spread across the oak table. Her voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had transformed failure into triumph. The men who once dismissed her now leaned forward, pencils poised over notebooks, desperate to capture her wisdom. Jacob Morrison stood behind her chair like a sentinel. His weathered hands rested on the table's edge. 3 months ago, neither of them could have imagined this moment. 3 months ago, Eva had been delivered to his failing ranch like a sack of grain nobody wanted. The mahogany doors burst open. Councilman Bradley swept into the Territorial Cattle Association meeting hall, his black coat billowing behind him like storm clouds. Sheriff Hawkins followed, his badge catching the lamplight. A cluster of well-dressed men filled the doorway, their faces sharp with purpose. Bradley's voice cut through the room's stunned silence. "That woman is presenting stolen intellectual property. I demand her immediate arrest." The assembled ranchers shifted in their seats. Some looked confused. Others nodded as if they had been expecting this moment. Eva's hands remained steady on her presentation papers. She did not flinch when the sheriff's boots echoed across the wooden floor. Jacob stepped forward, his jaw set. On what grounds? Property theft, fraud, impersonation of a qualified expert. Bradley's words fell like hammer blows. A paralyzed woman of her station cannot possibly possess such knowledge legitimately. The room's temperature seemed to drop. Eva looked up at Jacob, her dark eyes holding secrets that had sustained her through months of careful planning. He saw something there he recognized, the calm of someone who had prepared for this exact moment. She straightened in her chair, her voice carrying across the silent room. "Gentlemen, I suppose it's time you learned the whole truth about how I came to be here." The grandfather clock in the corner marked time with its steady tick. Eva's words hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. She would tell them everything, but first they needed to understand how a cruel joke had become the foundation of something extraordinary. 3 months earlier, the Broken Creek Ranch had been dying by degrees. Jacob Morrison spent his mornings counting losses and his evenings avoiding mirrors. The cattle grew thin on overgrazed land. The well pump wheezed like an old man's lungs. Creditors circled like buzzards. He was mending fence when the Hartwell brothers arrived with their wagon. Tom and Eddie Hartwell had the kind of smiles that appeared before bad news. Their horses kicked up dust clouds that settled on everything like a curse. "Got a present for you, Morrison." Tom's grin showed too many teeth. "Won her fair and square off that Georgia boy in last night's poker game." They pulled back the wagon's canvas covering. Eva Washington sat in the bed, her legs covered by a rough blanket, her back straight despite the circumstances. She studied Jacob with eyes that missed nothing. Her dress was clean, but patched. Her hands were folded in her lap like she was waiting for church to start. "Name's Eva," Eddie called out. "She's your new housekeeper." Jacob looked from Eva to the brothers. The cruelty of the gesture settled in his stomach like bad water. They knew she couldn't perform traditional housework. They knew he couldn't afford to feed another mouth. It was their idea of entertainment. "I didn't ask for help." "Course you didn't. But you need it." Tom's voice carried mock concern. "Place is falling apart. Woman's got to be good for something, even in her condition." Eva spoke for the first time, her voice soft but clear. "I can cook. I can clean what I can reach. I won't be trouble." Her words carried the careful cadence of someone who had learned to make herself small, but Jacob caught something underneath, an intelligence that didn't match the simple speech. She was performing, just like he performed the role of the failed rancher who didn't care about anything. The Hartwells unloaded Eva's wheelchair from the wagon with unnecessary roughness. It was a simple wooden construction, worn smooth by use. They lifted her into it without gentleness, treating her like cargo to be moved. "She's all yours, Morrison. Don't say we never gave you nothing." Their laughter followed them down the dusty road. Jacob stood in his yard, watching a woman he didn't know navigate her chair across the uneven ground toward his cabin. She moved with practiced efficiency, her arms strong despite her circumstances. The first night was awkward silence and careful distance. Eva made cornbread and beans from his meager supplies. The meal was better than anything he had cooked in months. She ate quickly, her eyes on her plate, then retreated to the small room he had indicated was hers. Through the thin walls, he heard her moving around, arranging things, organizing a space that would become hers whether he wanted it or not. Jacob sat by his fireplace, staring into flames that offered no answers. The next morning he found her outside before dawn. She sat in her chair beside the cattle pen, studying his remaining livestock with the focused attention of someone reading an important book. The sick bull stood apart from the others, its breathing labored. "He's not eating," she said when Jacob approached. "Been that way for weeks. Vet says it's just age." Eva wheeled closer to the fence. The bull lifted its head, nostrils flaring. She made a soft clicking sound with her tongue. The animal took a step toward her, then another. "He's got pain in his belly. See how he stands? Front legs wide, back legs close. He's trying to take pressure off his stomach." Jacob studied the bull's posture. She was right. He had been so focused on the animal's obvious symptoms that he had missed the subtle signs of its distress. "You know cattle?" Eva's answer came too quickly. "Little bit, had some back home." But her assessment had been too precise, too technical. This wasn't casual farm knowledge. This was the kind of detailed understanding that came from serious study. Jacob filed the information away with his other growing questions about his unexpected houseguest. The bull collapsed that afternoon. Jacob stood over the animal, watching its labored breathing, calculating the loss. The veterinarian's visit would cost money he didn't have for a diagnosis he already knew. The bull was dying. Eva rolled her chair as close to the fence as she could manage. "What if I told you I know what's wrong? What if I told you how to fix it?" Her voice had changed. The careful dialect was gone, replaced by clear, educated speech. Jacob turned to face her fully. Her dark eyes held knowledge that didn't match anything he thought he knew about her. "I'd ask why you've been hiding it. Same reason you hide those veterinary journals under your bed. Same reason you pretend not to care when your cattle suffer. Some knowledge is dangerous in the wrong hands." The evening air carried the sound of the bull's distressed breathing. Jacob looked at Eva, really looked at her, and saw someone who might understand the weight of secrets. Someone who might know what it felt like to bury the best parts of yourself so deep that you almost forgot they existed. "Tell me what you see." Eva wheeled closer to the fence, her hands gripping the wooden rails. The bull's sides heaved with each labored breath. Its eyes rolled white with pain. Grain founder. Too much rich feed too fast. His stomach can't process it properly. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had seen this before. The previous owner probably tried to fatten him quick before selling. Jacob studied the animal's stance again. Front legs braced wide, back legs drawn up. Everything Eva described made sense. The veterinarian had missed it completely. "What do we do?" "Mineral oil. 2 quarts. Force it down his throat with a bottle. Walk him slow for hours. Keep his system moving." She turned to face Jacob. "It'll take all night, maybe longer." The wind picked up, carrying dust across the yard like scattered thoughts. Jacob had spent 3 months watching this bull deteriorate. 3 months accepting inevitable loss. Now Eva offered something he had almost forgotten existed. Hope. I fetched the mineral oil from the barn. Eva guided him through the process, her instructions precise and calm. The bull resisted at first, then accepted the treatment with the resignation of something that had given up fighting. They walked the animal in slow circles around the pen. Eva rolled alongside in her chair, monitoring the bull's breathing, watching for signs of improvement. Jacob held the lead rope, feeling the massive creature's weight shift with each careful step. Hours passed. The stars wheeled overhead like distant promises. Eva's voice broke the silence between them, no longer careful or performed. "I learned from Dr. Sarah Whitman in Georgia. She was the only woman I knew who understood that intelligence doesn't care about the color of your skin or the use of your legs. Jacob absorbed this information like dry ground accepting rain. What happened to her? The war came. Her family fled north. I stayed with the cattle. Eva's hands moved restlessly on her chair's arms. Some knowledge is worth protecting, even when protecting it costs everything else. The bull's breathing began to ease. Its steps grew steadier. By dawn, the animal was showing interest in water. By afternoon, it was cropping grass with careful deliberation. Jacob stood in his kitchen, watching Eva prepare their evening meal. Her movements were efficient and sure. She had transformed his rough supplies into something that filled the cabin, with warmth and the promise of better days. "The pasture rotation is wrong," she said without looking up from her cooking. "You're overgrazing the good land and leaving the rest untouched. Cattle need variety. Different grasses provide different nutrients." Jacob poured coffee into 2 chipped cups. The conversation felt dangerous and necessary, like walking on ice that might hold their weight or might crack beneath them. "Show me." The next morning, Eva mapped out a rotation system using stakes and string. She divided Jacob's land into sections, explaining how to move the cattle systematically, allowing each area to recover while others were grazed. Her knowledge came in steady streams, each piece fitting perfectly with the next. The ranch began to change. Not quickly, but with the steady progress of something growing toward the light. The cattle put on weight. The overused pastures started to recover. Jacob found himself watching Eva work, marveling at the mind that could see solutions where he had only seen problems. She redesigned his water system, creating channels that distributed moisture more efficiently. She identified plants that enriched the soil and others that depleted it. She taught him to read the health of his land like a book written in grass and stone. Evenings became conversations. Eva spoke about soil composition and breeding practices. Jacob shared observations about weather patterns and market trends. Neither mentioned their lives before this place, but the careful distance between them began to close. 3 weeks after the bull's recovery, Tom Hartwell rode into Jacob's yard. His horse kicked up dust that settled on everything like a judgment. His smile had turned sour at the edges. "Heard your cattle are looking better." Jacob continued repairing. Fence, his movements steady and deliberate. "They're eating regular. Funny thing, that bull we thought was dying, saw him from the road yesterday, fat as a spring calf." Tom's voice carried suspicious undertones. "Makes a man wonder what kind of help you've been getting." Eva emerged from the cabin, a basket of clean laundry balanced on her lap. She nodded politely to Tom but said nothing. Her silence felt like armor worn smooth by experience. "Woman's got you fooled, Morrison, acting like she knows something about ranching, probably filling your head with nonsense." The fence wire sang in Jacob's hands as he pulled it tight. "Stock's healthy, that's all that matters." Tom's horse danced sideways, sensing its rider's agitation. "Folks are talking, saying you're listening to advice that ain't natural, saying things that don't make sense." Jacob set down his tools and faced Tom directly. The air between them grew thick with unspoken challenges. "My cattle, my land, my business. Your funeral." Tom wheeled his horse around, but his parting words carried like smoke on the wind. "Just remember what she is, Morrison. Some gifts come with prices you can't afford to pay." That evening, Jacob found Eva sitting on the cabin's small porch, staring at the horizon where the sun was painting the sky in shades of fire and regret. Her hands lay still in her lap. "He's not wrong about the talking," she said without turning. "People notice when things change too fast, when the natural order gets disturbed." Jacob settled into the chair beside her. The wood creaked under, his weight, a sound as familiar as his own breathing. "What are you afraid of?" Eva's laugh held no humor. "Everything. Always everything." She turned to look at him, her eyes reflecting the dying light. "But mostly I'm afraid of hoping this might last." The bull grazed peacefully in the distance, living proof that some things could be saved if you knew how to see them clearly. Jacob understood that Eva had given him more than knowledge about cattle and grass. She had reminded him what it felt like to believe in tomorrow. But Tom Hartwell's visit had planted seeds of unease that would grow in the dark. Other ranchers were watching now, asking questions, making connections that threatened the fragile world he and Ava were building together. The wind carried the scent of rain from distant clouds. Change was coming whether they were ready or not. The territorial inspector arrived on a Tuesday morning, when the sky hung low and gray like disappointment. 3 men in dark suits emerged from a government wagon, their boots stirring dust that settled on everything like accusations. Jacob met them at the gate. Ava remained on the porch, her hands folded in her lap, watching with the stillness of someone who had learned to become invisible when danger approached. "Routine inspection," the lead inspector announced. His badge caught what little sunlight filtered through the clouds. "Reports of unusual activity, unnatural improvements to livestock and land." They walked the property with clipboards and skeptical eyes. The inspector made notes about the healthy cattle, the improved pastures, the efficient water system. His questions came like probes searching for weakness. "Who designed this grazing rotation?" "I did." Jacob's voice carried no uncertainty. "Water management system?" "Mine." "Breeding records?" "Also mine." Eva watched from a distance, her wheelchair positioned where she could observe but not interfere. The inspector's gaze lingered on her longer than necessary, taking inventory of her presence like she was another piece of property to be catalogued. After 2 hours, they found nothing improper, no evidence of illegal activity, no proof of the unnatural influences Tom Hartwell had suggested. They departed with warnings about maintaining proper documentation and following territorial regulations. But their visit had changed the air around the ranch. Word would spread that the government was watching. Other questions would follow. That evening, Jacob found Eva in his study. She sat beside his desk, a leather portfolio open in her lap, papers scattered around her chair like fallen leaves. Her face held the concentration of someone working through a complex problem. "What is this?" She looked up, startled. For a moment, her expression held the guilt of someone caught in forbidden territory. Then her features settled into resignation. "Insurance," she said quietly. Jacob moved closer, studying the documents. Engineering drawings, mathematical calculations, structural diagrams that looked familiar despite the years that had passed since he had last seen them. "Where did you get these?" "Found them in your desk drawer, the one that sticks." Ava's voice carried no apology. "I was looking for paper to document the breeding records. Found something more important instead." The drawings were his original bridge designs, the calculations that had once represented the pinnacle of his engineering career. The work that had been destroyed by sabotage and political corruption, taking his reputation with it. "You had no right." "I had every right." Eva's tone sharpened. "These calculations are brilliant. The bridge failure wasn't your fault. Someone else caused the collapse." Jacob sank into his chair, the weight of old shame settling on his shoulders like a familiar coat. "You don't understand. I was responsible. People died because of my design. People died because someone altered your specifications." Ava wheeled closer, her finger tracing the precise lines of his original work. "The load calculations are perfect. The stress distributions are exactly right, but look at this." She pulled out a newspaper clipping from the portfolio. The accident report, yellowed with age. Jacob had read it 1,000 times, memorizing every word of his professional obituary. The iron used in construction was substandard, 20% weaker than your specifications required. The cement mixture was diluted. The foundation depth was reduced by 3 feet. Eva's voice grew stronger with each revelation. "Your design would have worked perfectly if it had been built as you intended." The room fell silent except for the tick of the mantel clock. Jacob stared at his own handwriting on the engineering drawings, seeing his younger self's confidence and precision. He had been good at this work, better than good. "Why does it matter now?" "Because they're going to try to take credit for my innovations. When they do, you'll need proof that you're more than a failed rancher who got lucky." Eva gathered the papers with careful movements. I've been writing to contacts in Denver and Chicago. Engineers who remember your work, who knew it was sound. Jacob felt something shift inside his chest, a loosening of the tight coil of self-hatred he had carried for years. What contacts? The ones I've been corresponding with since I arrived. Eva's smile held secrets and strategy. I told you I learned from Dr. Sarah Whitman. I didn't mention that she introduced me to her husband's engineering colleagues before the war, men who respected her mind and, by extension, mine. She pulled out another set of documents. Letters written in careful script, bearing official letterheads from engineering firms and territorial offices. Jacob recognized some of the names, men who had once been his peers. They remember you, Jacob. They remember that the Morrison Bridge design was revolutionary. They also remember the political climate that made you a convenient scapegoat. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Jacob felt the past reshaping itself around him, old certainties crumbling like poorly mixed mortar. Why didn't you tell me? Because you weren't ready to hear it. Because you needed to believe in yourself again before you could believe in justice. Eva folded her hands over the portfolio. I needed you to see your own worth through our work here before I could show you your worth in the work you left behind. A knock at the door interrupted them. Jacob opened it to find Councilman Bradley on his porch, flanked by two men in expensive coats. Their faces carried the careful neutrality of people delivering ultimatums. Mr. Morrison, Miss Washington. Bradley's voice held false courtesy. Might we come in? We have a proposition that could benefit everyone. They arranged themselves in Jacob's small living room like pieces on a chessboard. Bradley sat across from Eva, his eyes studying her with the attention of a man appraising livestock. Your ranch has shown remarkable improvement, unusual improvement. His words carried implications heavy as storm clouds. The territorial government has an interest in such innovations. Eva's hands remained steady on her chair's arms. What kind of interest? The kind that recognizes valuable intellectual property belongs to the territory, for the greater good. Bradley's smile revealed teeth sharp as winter. Of course, proper compensation would be provided to the legitimate owner. Jacob felt the trap closing around them. Meaning these improvements clearly resulted from established engineering and agricultural principles that a qualified professional could implement with proper documentation and legal authority. The fire popped in the hearth, sending sparks up the chimney like tiny stars seeking escape. Eva and Jacob exchanged a look that held years of shared understanding, compressed into a single moment. And if we refuse? Bradley's expression hardened. Then we might have to examine the legal status of everyone involved. Make sure all residents of the territory are properly documented and authorized to own property or provide professional services. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Eva could lose everything. Her freedom, her innovations, her carefully built new life, unless Jacob claimed her work as his own. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows like impatient fingers drumming against glass. Change was coming whether they were ready or not. Bradley stood, his companions following like trained dogs. Think about it, Mr. Morrison. Some decisions can't be undone once the wrong choice is made. After they left, Jacob and Eva sat in silence. The portfolio lay between them like a bridge connecting their separate histories of loss and hope. Both had been betrayed by systems that reduced human worth to political convenience. Eva reached into her dress pocket and withdrew a sealed envelope. Her movements carried the weight of final decisions. There's something else you need to know. Eva broke the envelope's seal with steady fingers. The letter inside bore the official seal of the Colorado territorial government. Her eyes scanned the document twice before she handed it to Jacob. Full citizenship papers, legal property rights, authorization to conduct business in the territory. Her voice carried the quiet triumph of someone who had planned for this moment, granted to persons of exceptional contribution to territorial development. Jacob studied the document, recognizing the signatures and official stamps. How long have you had this? It arrived yesterday, along with another letter you need to see. The second envelope contained correspondence from the Territorial Engineering Board. Jacob's name appeared in bold type across the letterhead. An official review of the bridge collapse had been completed. New evidence of construction fraud and material substitution. Full exoneration of the original design. Your reputation is restored. The engineering board wants to offer you territorial infrastructure projects. Eva folded the letters with careful precision. We both have what we need to fight Bradley's threat. The next morning brought wagons and riders to the ranch. The Hartwell brothers arrived with forged documents claiming ownership of Eva and her innovations. Sheriff Hawkins followed reluctantly, his face showing the discomfort of a man enforcing laws he didn't believe in. Behind them came Councilman Bradley with his political allies, dressed for a funeral or a victory celebration. Their confident smiles suggested they expected no resistance to their carefully planned seizure. Time to collect what belongs to the territory, Tom Hartwell announced, waving his false papers like a battle flag. Eva emerged from the cabin, her portfolio balanced on her lap, her bearing straight as a judge preparing to deliver verdict. Jacob stood beside her chair, his hand resting on her shoulder in a gesture of solidarity that spoke louder than words. Sheriff Hawkins, Eva's voice carried across the yard with authority that made men twice her size pay attention. I believe you'll want to examine these documents before you proceed. She handed him the citizenship papers and property rights authorization. The sheriff read slowly, his weathered face showing surprise and growing relief. He passed the documents to Bradley, whose confident expression cracked like dry earth accepting rain. These appear to be in order, the sheriff said quietly. Bradley snatched the papers, studying them with the desperation of a man watching his plans dissolve. Impossible. She cannot legally hold such documents. The territorial governor disagrees. Eva's smile held the satisfaction of someone who had learned to play a rigged game and win anyway. As does the Federal Office for Territorial Development. Jacob stepped forward, his own letter in hand. The engineering board has also restored my professional standing. We're both legally authorized to conduct business and own property. The forged documents in Tom Hartwell's hands suddenly looked like what they were. Crude fakes that wouldn't survive official scrutiny. His brother Eddie shifted nervously, recognizing the trap they had walked into. This isn't over, Bradley said, but his voice lacked conviction. Political men survived by reading the wind, and the wind had changed direction. The Territorial Cattle Association meeting that evening drew ranchers from across 3 counties. Word had spread about the confrontation at Broken Creek Ranch. Men came to witness Eva's presentation, some hoping to see her fail, others curious about the innovations that had transformed Jacob's failing operation. Eva rolled her wheelchair to the front of the room, her charts and breeding records arranged with military precision. The same ranchers who had hung on her every word now watched with various mixtures of respect, suspicion, and grudging admiration. She presented her methods with the calm authority of someone whose right to speak could no longer be questioned. Grazing rotation systems that improved soil health, breeding programs that produced stronger livestock, water management techniques that maximized limited resources. The questions came sharp and testing. Eva answered each one with specifics that demonstrated deep understanding. Some ranchers took notes. Others nodded approval. A few remained skeptical, but skepticism based on method rather than prejudice carried different weight. When the presentation ended, the room erupted in discussion. Ranchers compared notes, debated applications to their own operations, argued about implementation costs. Eva had done more than prove her expertise. She had started a revolution in how they thought about their land. The association voted unanimously to recognize Eva as the territory's first certified livestock and land management consultant. Jacob received appointment as territorial infrastructure engineer. Together, they would advise ranchers across the region while expanding their own operation. Bradley and the Hartwell brothers left early, their political gamble having failed completely. The sheriff tore up the forged documents and warned them about future fraud attempts. Justice moved slowly in the territory, but it moved. 6 months later, Broken Creek Ranch bore little resemblance to the failing operation Jacob had inherited. The pastures rolled green and healthy under careful management. The cattle grazed in organized rotation, their condition drawing admiration from visiting ranchers. Ava received correspondence from agricultural colleges asking her to document her methods. Government officials sought her advice on territorial land policy. Ranchers traveled hundreds of miles to consult with the woman who had revolutionized their understanding of sustainable livestock management. Jacob's engineering projects dotted the territory. Bridges built to his specifications, water systems designed for maximum efficiency. Each successful project restored more of his professional reputation and proved that redemption was possible for those willing to fight for it. The invitation from Washington arrived on a Tuesday morning, bright with promise. The Federal Agricultural Department wanted Eva to advise on national land management policy. Jacob received a parallel invitation to consult on Western infrastructure development. They stood on their porch that evening, watching cattle graze in pastures that reflected years of careful planning and shared labor. The ranch had become proof that two broken people could build something stronger together than either could create alone. The Hartwells thought they were playing a joke, Eva said, her voice carrying the wonder of someone still amazed by unexpected grace. Jacob adjusted the new sign by their gate. Broken Creek Ranch had become Morrison and Washington Territorial Consultants. Their partnership had evolved from survival strategy to successful business model. Best joke anyone ever played on us? Ava laughed, the sound carrying across their land like music. Well then, let's see what other jokes we can turn into triumphs. The sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that worth wasn't determined by circumstances of birth, but by the courage to pursue excellence despite every obstacle. Their success had become the territory's success. Their partnership had shown others that strength came not from conformity, but from recognizing value wherever it appeared. The lonely rancher and the woman given to him as a cruel joke had become the pride of the West through nothing more complicated than seeing each other clearly and choosing to build something beautiful together. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel, and if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.